Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us on today's Inclusively webinar, Building Inclusion into TELUS, presented by Lewis Insight and Sensafili. Our speakers today are Ibrahim Gedeon, CTO of TELUS, Chris Lewis, Founding Director of Lewis Insight, and Monica Paolini, Principal at Sensafili. I'm Kendra Chamberlain, and I will be moderating our webinar today. We'd like to encourage our audience to participate in the discussion, so please share your comments and questions using the chat function on the Zoom taskbar. All comments are visible to all participants, so please keep the conversation polite and respectful. Our speakers will do their best to answer questions as they go along and as they become relevant to the topics being discussed, so please do not hold your questions until the end. And with that, I will hand it over to Monica.
Kendra, thank you so much. As always, it's a great pleasure to be here and to talk about inclusion and diversity with my partner, Chris. And also today we have Ibrahim from TELUS that both Chris and I have known for a very long time. And he's a great guy. So, you know, on top of an interesting topic, it's always excellent to chat with him and hear his thoughts about pretty much anything. Now, before we get into that, I just want to give you a little bit of an update on where we are with Inclusively. We have been working and thinking and trying to expand it, and we are announcing the first 4 partners we have, and stay tuned because we're going to add more. We have the Mobile Ecosystem Forum, MEF, TIP, and Telecom TV, and UK TIN. UK TIN is the UK Telecoms Innovation Forum, just launched a few months ago. And so we're working with the partners to have more events like this and other types of events. And we look forward to it. And again, this event is similar to other ones that we had in terms of format before with Rakuten, BT, Vodafone, and TIP, where we talk about different topics. And today the focus is what's happening at TELUS in Canada. And so what is interesting in all these conversations is that nobody really has the final answer, but we all have a lot of lessons that we've learned. And oftentimes what really is interesting is that is the commitment of the person. And Ibrahim is very committed to this. So it's a great talking to, again, Ibrahim. And with that, I'm going to ask Chris to give us an introduction to this. So Chris, over to you.
Thanks, Monica. Thanks, Kendra. And Ibrahim, welcome. It's an absolute pleasure to have you with us. And I think when I saw you in person in London a few months ago and I mentioned this subject to you, you immediately said, yes, get me on board. I'll do this. So I guess my opening question to you, as well as welcoming you, is, you know, what does inclusion, diversity, and equity mean to you from a broad thinking perspective? And we'll come on then to talk about TELUS and talk about technology, but that from a big picture point of view, what does it mean to you?
Well, I think, Chris, so I'm very excited about diversity and inclusion, and I think what we've done at TELUS is it's kind of a corporate thing versus people in culture or HR, right? Like it's everybody's job. I think it's part of being Canadian helps, right? Like we're a diverse culture, collection of people trying to morph into something like common values. But in particular, my personal passion and focus is how do we make sure we don't miss out on 50% of the innovation, which is the women in the workforce, right? Because from a cultural point of view, Canada is very rich. No issues. You should go to one of our lunchrooms pre-COVID, like the food is beautiful. It's like you're in a bazaar with 80 different cuisines. But anyway, I rambled on, but we're pretty excited. I also have some stats if you'd like me to share on what our team members through our engagement strategy feel about how we treat them from this point of view.
Since you've been in your role, you talk, and it's great to hear all the different streams of things that you've been pushing. It's very important. We've identified in the inclusively work that, you know, the people are excluded. So I know we talk about inclusion, but the excluded groups, you quite rightly talk about the elderly because of their ability with technology. So it's sort of both ends, isn't it? The education side with the young, education through the existing workforce, then educating the elderly, helping people with disability, people who are not physically able to connect because of reach of network or whatever. So there's all these different groups. But in your job as CTO, how much has it changed it since then, and how easy has it been to get the senior management on board and the rest of the company? I mean, you say it's part of the Canadian culture, the TELUS culture. How would you say it's evolved over the last, I don't know, 5 years?
Well, I think Chris, what I meant is I think Canada itself is culturally diverse, so we're very
agreed. Yeah.
But what I noticed in engineering and having been involved for the last 25 years in technology in particular, starting from the home. So I just want to share one stat. All girls schools, the same amount of percentage of women go to STEM than men. When it's mixed, it drops. So we have a fundamental community issue that way, right? So we have this extremes, but one of my issues is if we miss out on the gender diversity piece, I was lucky enough to work in a team that was 40% female. We're missing out on half our population. So I think what's changed now, so there's some good stuff that's changed and some bad stuff. And I think that's why you and Monica asked me, because I say it like it is. So I think there's been a lot more effort. People care more about D&I. There's a lot of corporations have a cosmetic slap on it. But I think some people are trying earnestly to do something, and it's up to us as senior leaders in all domains, including technology, to take advantage of some of these programs. Like, for example, I don't know how many of my peers have in their scorecard a diversity and inclusion metric. That's just for our team, right? Like, I think it's very important. What doesn't get measured doesn't get done. It's not just some high-level TELUS value. It's at every level of the organization. Like, my personal and my team's performance is predicated on how well we support diversity and inclusion activities.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to be honest in the sense that, you know, it's a little bit of a challenge that we're facing. So you don't want to just deny it, and that's the best way to move forward. You need to measure, be honest, and move on. Now, it just goes all the way from top management to the, you know, to any employee, because you have to kind of internalize it. Now, let me ask you a question here, because okay, you want to have, say, more women, but if you, I would imagine that a lot of the people that are trying to hire have engineering backgrounds. I don't, so that doesn't really apply to me. But anyway, but you know, in engineering, so women are getting most of over 50% of college degrees, but in engineering and generally in STEM, it's much lower. So when you hire, you do have there is an issue of how can you get, say, 50%. I mean, I would imagine you don't use quotas, but as you try to approach the sort of 50-50, that's hard because you don't have enough of a pool of applicants. So this is the one thing. And but the other one is oftentimes women get hired, but they kind of leave, or, you know, whatever. So the question is retention as well. So how do you manage both the hiring and retention part?
We love your rambling. And I think what you've described there could be applied to pretty much any industry, any business. Can we perhaps change it a little bit more to think about telecoms? And, you know, we've excluded many people from the employment side because of the technology that we've deployed. Is the shift to a more software-centric world, does that take down some of those barriers? And then, so think about the internal employment, and then secondly, the way in which we deal with our customers. So deal with the employment bit first. Does a more software-centric environment open up more opportunities for both for women and for disabled and all those people?
Well, I think to go back to the telecom industry or the internet, like, I think we do enough health and internet and agriculture at TELUS. So I'll try to keep it in the traditional business of telecom. But Chris, you're 100% right. As we go more to software, it's not just engineering, it's computer science, it's physicists, it's data science has opened a whole new area. So I think it's our industry in general, as we started softwareizing, has expanded to have a larger pool of people. So I think that's a very good first step in the first place. So if you look at the averages, coming out of our academic institutions, we have access to 40% of females versus males, which I think is very good. So that's the very first one in terms of expanding it beyond telecom engineers only, right? I think in the hard sciences and pure R&D with the vendors like the Cisco's, like the Nokias, like the Samsungs, you'll find they still more men, but at least in the telco space with softwareization and what we're doing, we're very excited. We're hitting 40, going towards 50. Like we need always these goals that stretch us, right? If I'm just happy being slightly better than the average, I'll never move the yardstick forward. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Plus, I'm type A+ personality. Being just a bit better is not in my DNA. That's the first one.
May I go one step further? And so we're moving more towards software, but with things like ChatGPT, even the software can be done by machines. So you think that is going to change as well? Because it might be that your sort of ability to code is not all that important, but the ability to manage the whole process. And so that might require a different type of skills. And it might be the kind of skills that traditionally have attracted women more. You see what I mean? So you think that might change things as well?
I think I was going to do my second point.
Oh, God, sorry, I just cut you off.
No,
Just go ahead with the second point.
But Monica, it addresses your issue because I think COVID told us we can be remote for a lot of things. And I think being remote is good for anybody, right? So your environment, your safety, or everything. So I think that whole change, we could do it. And if you look at California, there's been a massive trend that they want people to come back to work. I do believe on collaboration, and on certain areas you do need to whiteboard, and the tools are not there affordably, right? So you can spend 20, 30K per employee and get certain things that do all these things, but in general, they're not there. So there's a lot of go back to the office. Like I'm from my office now because I find if I'm at home, and I have a fantastic office at home, but I end up with 100 steps the whole day. So I'm so excited going to my office so I can park my car, go grab a coffee. I might get 2,000 steps without having to exercise. So, but I think it's such an important element because it actually enabled people to gear their life around their needs. So you have to add that as a plus, right? When you're talking about any kind of diversity, be it disabilities, be it age, be it cultural, be it gender, be it something as basic as food. Like we don't talk about somebody's diabetic and to keep their weight, they need certain food, which is not really available in restaurants, something they can do at home. So I think, Monica, that's such an amazing thing that happened. But I do believe camaraderie is lost. Like I'm very blunt, like Chris knows me very well. Like the old days where you got to know people, go to their homes, they know you. But we need to find ways to make that up, to stay, I think, on top of things, because that's actually missing. When I get to know you and I get to know Chris more,
yeah.
That bond is so much better as you start working and doing stuff.
I think the point really is that as we automate much more inside the engine room of the telco, then that will change the roles, change the jobs that people do. And perhaps I think you're right, Monica. I think it will move away from the pure data science physicist towards more marketing, more soft sciences, if you like, in terms of the way. As long as the tools.
If you look at I realize I didn't answer your question. If you look at the labor force that we're going to hire, and God forgive me if I'm misspeaking, I think the actual engineering generalists are going to disappear over time as they are. So you're going to have more drivers that don't need to understand how the engines are actually working as we find out how we do the proper privacy and security and governance for Gen AI. And then your pool of resources are going to evolve to highly specialized SMEs plus more generalists. And that opens up more of the domain of being good leaders, a technical empathy versus being the actual technology. I don't think everybody needs to understand how the engine's built, but we'll have less people that need to be able to fix the motor is where we're heading from that point of view.
But I think you're also right around you mentioned with AI and machine learning and building in the bias that's always been in the system, that we've got to be very careful with it. But kind of move on a little bit to think about the way telcos build their services and offer them, and the way we interact with the customer base. There's a massive customer base, which is incredibly diverse, as we know, but to that point about being excluded. And I, as you mentioned, being someone with a vision problem, I've been using screen readers on laptops and mobile phones for a very long time. But actually designing the interface so that everybody, whether it's my 90-year-old mother or my younger brother who's also blind but hates technology, so designing the interface so it works easily, and making sure that applications and websites are designed in such a way that because we've tended to design it around a sort of a messy technology way, haven't we? So how do you see that from your point of view? The way people use the service, the way we as telcos interact with the customer base, the contact centers, all those things.
And I guess that sort of going back, this is actually maybe connected to sort of the diversity, and gender is only obviously one dimension of diversity, that once you have a more diverse workforce, everybody's contributing in a different way. And so you might be sort of naturally be moving towards, say, interfaces and systems and processes that are more inclusive because the people are more diversity. So diversity and inclusion might just work hand in hand to enhance.
And Monica, one of the reasons we have our TELUS groups is how do we design the jobs to be friendly or supportive of disabilities, right? Versus saying, this is what the friggin' job is. How do we actually design it so it's actually inclusive, right? So inclusivity by design is not just for the services to sell customers that cool, we want to make money. But it's also, we need to design the internal jobs to think of these things, or else the default, like human nature, I'm going to go for 90%. Like, wouldn't you? So how do we work our systems and our processes where we design roles to make sure that that 10% is taken care of? And that's where that comes in, that thinking, the TELUS streams. We don't publicize this. Like we're we've got the diversity awards and all these kind of things.
Well, let me ask you, but how do you do this? Because, okay, that's a good, it's a good intention, but you have a bunch of people that are senior, they've been doing their job for a long time, they're expert, have all the expertise, they have all the tools to build things that are more inclusive. But you can just tell them be more inclusive, but that might be not enough. So you might need to either retrain them or give them some guidance. So how do you sort of help that process? Ibrahim, you're on mute.
Well, I was fantastic though on mute, but we have a number of diversity programs and training. I mean, I can share a link with, I think Daniel shared a link on the webinar chat about what TELUS does, but also for my own leadership team and all the management folks, we have a certain diversity training that we undertake that we're gonna, and courses we recommend. Some stuff we mandate, but I think it's very important to keep on that, as you said, working it, right? And then the teams do make a bunch of recommendations that are reviewed at senior levels to see implementing them, what that means, right, Monica? So that's why I think it goes back to when I started. It's not a one-person job. It's something the organization has to undertake, and it can't solve all problems, but we got to find ways to show sustained and improved progress.
I'm going to take you back to my customer experience question, because as a blind user, the frustration I encounter going through websites, going through the mobile apps of the different players is enormous. and I also ended up working on behalf of my mother to do her. How do you see the omni-channel, the changes in the channels of interaction? Because a lot of the industry dialogue and narrative is, oh, it's digital first, it's mobile first, but it's never put as being human first. And aren't they the customers? Shouldn't we think of it more in human terms and human preferences? And how far are we away from actually having something which will be my preference, so mainly audio channel, or a hearing impaired person, maybe more visual channel. Are we a long way from doing that, or is that just a bit of tweaking of the technology?
So it's such a big topic. So we actually stopped calling it digital first or mobile first. We actually 4 years ago called it the humanized digital experience.
Good.
Because we thought it's something for technologies to put in an area which is empathetic to the end users versus that they're so happy. I build the mobile app first, and I build the web app, and it actually forces a complete different thinking on the software stack, to go technical here on this one. And then you have many facets to make it be audio only, right? But once you've done the groundwork, but if you do it in a certain way, so one of the reasons we joined the TMF ODA Alliance is not so much to get a brand, but we gotta design these things that can adapt and port to any way we want. And I know I'm speaking generalities, but technically, Chris, then it becomes cheaper to provide it, or more affordable. You see what I mean? Which is the key. But like there's all these audio machine language interactions, right? Like, so with the right architecture, I can use anybody, Alexa, Siri, Hey Google. If you're building it as telco digital first or whatnot, you're not thinking of leveraging all the tools that somebody with a disability would need. And I think that's critical, right?
Yeah, and this is, I guess this is something that we see again and again, that if you have a more inclusive approach, you not only get the excluded people to join, but you also make your life easier. And in a sense that you kind of get rid of some things that maybe you don't need to. You kind of reduce the clutter, you simplify things. And so back to your point, you might get to a point where we are focusing on the important stuff, which is what is that we are communicating and how to make it more efficient. So I think that, and I don't know whether you've seen it, but this is what we hear all the time. And I think it's really important, because it just leads us to have better processes and better design principles, regardless of the specific focus on a specific type of disability.
And I think that's the key thing, right? Like, how do we build technologies, for the lack of a better word, that can adapt? Because it's so easy to say, oh, well, that's how it works. I got 90% of the population. Screw you guys. It's too expensive. I think if we actually care, and Chris has gone from DNI internally to DNI with our clients, how do I make sure that actually I build it so I can adapt it, right? Versus it's not adaptable, right? Like and I think that's the key thing, right? Like if you look at some of the beauties of what Android did as an ecosystem, by opening it up, most applications for the disabled are through Android. Because you can actually access the OS and make changes and get the alerts. And one of the things is we have 1,000+ partners at TELUS that onboard the services, right? So I think you got to be API based. So all these things impact technology. So not that DNI drives it, but DNI aware as we build technology is critical.
But actually, Ibrahim, what is interesting, I split my loyalty between my Windows laptop with accessibility and my iPhone. Actually, the iPhone has been the benchmark for accessibility for me. And I agree, I can't play with a lot of the parameters, but it's so well embedded in the operating system that pretty much most apps conform to it, and I can almost run my business off my iPhone without being able to see a screen. So and ironically, Apple got into it because they wanted to get in the education market in the US. And they were told they had to be accessible. So I think it is more adaptable in the Android community, but it's certainly well present within the Apple community. And Microsoft is doing a lot within Windows to develop its own thing. I just, in my left ear, I just heard a comment about your relay service for the hard of hearing and deafblind. It's a great example of something which was developed for a particular condition, disability, obviously at some expense to you and obviously other telcos around the world. And I think this is where I see a real win for everybody here, is that we used to design it for one area and it was kept in isolation. I used to use an unbelievably expensive OCR reading machine at university, which cost $100,000, which is now a £7 app on my phone. And the point being that if we design it in isolation and there's no link between all the other potential assistive technologies in there, and not just assistive, you might find that people prefer to use text. We talk about captioning a lot in the media world. Some people prefer to watch the captions rather than listen to the dialogue, because they find it easier to follow the language, for example. So I think there is an interesting design element here, which we've certainly never had because it was always designed around different disabilities and the charitable sectors did a lot to do it. So I think the opportunity to build it into the operating system, whether it's Android, Apple, or iOS or Windows, to have it there native when we start using apps is incredibly powerful. And I've mentioned this before, but I'll repeat it for this audience, that I've found that I've been losing a little bit of hearing in my right ear, so I've started using hearing aids. What I find is that I want to manage that hearing aid from my iPhone with their app, but there's a conflict between managing that hearing aid and giving me the voice over speech output that I need because I can't see, because it's been designed in isolation. So I think you mentioned.
I was going to mention it because they never thought you'd need audio to run an audio app, which is that's the area where you're talking about it, which is 100% right. I can see the contention.
Yeah, and also one of the things we're going to do in a future episode, we're going to get the people who do design from an academic and a graphic design and product design point of view, because we design these products with a central market in mind and not with all the use cases in mind, and that it's really important that everybody gets involved in this or on this mission. And the great thing is everybody can do something about it, because you think about your day job and what you do, you suddenly become much more aware of it. Now I'm rambling. Go on, Monica.
No, I think that this is important, and I guess that I would say, there is work not just on Apple. You use Apple, but Android. You just see. I mean, and that the approach is really changing. And I think, again, this is just something that goes top to bottom, and it's just a different way to look at things. And you just have to think about what is it you're doing for home. Exactly. And that is really changing all the, and I guess that's the issue about diversity, that traditionally it was seen as something we have to deal with, that it's going to cost us something. It's kind of like, well, we have to deal with it one way or another, but we'll try to minimize cost. As instead, it's an opportunity, because diversity adds to the value of what you do. So instead of it being a cost, you see it as an opportunity also for revenues.
It's a market opportunity, that there is no doubt, and that's why we talk much more about the excluded groups. And and there are some great examples, and it obviously got amplified during COVID, about people being remote, elderly people being able to use video calls and so on. But overall, but Ibrahim, I've got one very specific question I want to put at you. You're a technology guy. I know you love technology. You're very passionate about this topic we're talking about. What changes in technology, especially in the home? We accept there's a lot of changes in the business world, but in the home and that notion of healthcare and social care, I mean, in thinking about robots and drones and the like, I mean, surely that is a natural extension with massive potential to help people who are currently excluded. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm a huge. During COVID, we found out one of the biggest challenges was the elderly in the homes was a big challenge. So actually, we work with a couple of robot companies. I don't want to make an ad for them, but there's a Canadian-based Temi robot that was really cool. It maps out it does inexpensive, affordable, and it maps out the area of a space and knows where stairs are, whatnot. And it was so great. It's got a video screen, so it's not trying to build like a human. It's not a movie. It's not an Asimov 3-4 laws of things. It actually looks like a robot with a TV screen. But you can call it, it can walk you, it can show people around, it can call your loved ones. And we did a few of them for some of the elderly homes, right, during COVID. It did bring up the digital divide issue that all countries are challenged with. Like, does everybody have enough internet connections? Does everybody have enough Wi-Fi? So I think robots in the home are part of life. So what I was mentioning was 23,000 5 years ago. Now it's sub 10. So similar to your point, I think eventually they'll get to 5K robot. Just like when drones started, they were 5,000. I'm not even get it for $100. It's not the same, but you know what I mean, right? So I think it's the applications are beautiful, are immense. I'm not looking at somebody to chop my onions for now, but we all have kind of robots. Think about it. Today we have all these, for people who have gardens, we have watering systems, right? So they're fully automated. Well, in the future, why not have somebody run with a hose and do them, right? Would not be more on demand, blah, blah, blah. So I don't think we can exclude it, and we have to work it into our everyday life. Like one of the things with COVID is for young children that we did a little experiment at the hospital. They had a robot that walks them to their next appointment. If you remember when it started, nobody knew what the hell was going on. Like it was every country's chief medical officer. I mean, I don't know how 30 countries would have 30 different theories. Like, God bless them. Like if we troubleshoot it like that, we'd have outages for a whole year on the same network element. But effectively, everybody was scared of everything. And it was such a great thing to have audio, video assisted people walking you around a hospital or a clinic, right? So if it's democratized, it'll come to the home.
So my guide dog's ears just flapped down on the floor behind me. Will he be made redundant by a guide dog robot, do you think?
100%. You won't be able to pet him and get that satisfaction. But 100%, it's at 100K today, Chris. And they're smarter than your dog, who I'm sure is more human, and I would enjoy him more or her as an animal and as a pet. But it is still not affordable now.
Yeah.
So we've got some of the, you've seen the Boston Dynamics, but the Boston Dynamics robots, amazing. They can dance, they can program, you can download all of the GPS, they can do the maps, they've got cameras everywhere. They know when to cross, when not to cross. They've got audio aware. But they're not affordable to do what they want this to do
sure.
At this point in time.
Do you, I mean, guess what, just to close off this point, the accuracy, certainly I find in navigation is not good enough yet. And I guess there's a bandwidth issue about getting enough bandwidth everywhere. Is accuracy and bandwidth still an issue in your mind, or we're pretty much there?
I think it's very much there for certain applications. I think if you look at navigation, when you're camera aided, Chris, I think, and you're able to analyze, it's there, right? Like, so we are working with a few systems to go down to the centimeter range, which I think is very critical for these applications. What I think, so actually we have products for certain things. It goes back to affordability, like we chatted. Or do you want to do what Tesla did? Like everybody's stupid, nobody's automated except me. Half the cost of the car is sensors, right? Like, which again would defeat the purpose of democratizing. But I do believe you need to do multiple things, right? Because actually, I know we don't include them in our classical discussion on DNI, but people without the access to the internet should be included in that category.
Yeah.
So that's one area that you talked about that I agree with in terms of having everybody, and we've got a whole bunch of programs at TELUS for data for good, connecting people, whether through finance or whether through in remote areas. But I think that's one. And two, which is a point you bring up that I think we should make it available. Like it should be an API, just like GPS is available. We should, as a global telco industry, or as working with our competitors and our partners, we should work them together to say, okay, you know what, that API, it's not 50 cents because I'm selling it to the Canadian military or the US military today. It's available, right? So we should absorb some infrastructure projects as nations if we care. And I think we should.
I think you're right.
Like nobody will carry the freight. Like there's 5-6 telcos. Maybe in the old days when it was BT, yes, or Telecom Italia or Bell Canada or BC Tel or TELUS in Western Canada. But now that you've got 4 or 5 competitors, I think we either need the governments to step up and have ambitious projects that address
I tell you what will be interesting to keep an eye on, and we'll try and get some input on this in future inclusively, is I was talking with Google and Vodacom a couple of weeks ago, and they're developing between them unbelievably cheap smartphones, because one of the problems is getting a smartphone in people's hands. And then you think of the ARPU and the price points in the Indian market, so we may well get a bit of leakage from those markets into the so-called more mature markets with cheaper devices, lowering the entry point and giving people access. But you're right. There's so many cultural, technical, organizational issues that are running through this discussion, which is why we find it so fascinating.
And if I might add, the sort of digital divide sometimes is like, are you connected or not? But even if you are connected, you might have an issue as per se, the device is too expensive. But also there is a sort of a cultural, social, economic, cultural dimension to it. So I know some people that are in the right, they're perfectly connected, and yet, like even the concept of making a Zoom call for us is second nature. We know how to do a Zoom call. Some people just have trouble doing it. So, and I guess that's not sort of intentional, obviously, on anybody's part, but that's something else that we need to do. I have a sort of even more specific question, which is, so we talked about the accuracy. So as we go to 5G advance and 6G, so I have to mention that, but the sensing capabilities are going to increase. Is that going to be, that seems to me really important in terms of a lot of the applications you mentioned. So the technology itself is going to help us. It's not just us trying to do better. We will have better tools as well.
I think the tooling would be better, but I want to re-emphasize 2 things, Monica. One, you got to build it for that tooling to take advantage, because most of us used 5G for 4G, which was used for 3G, which was used for 2G. So I think to take advantage of it, that's why I talk about it to humanize. When I smiled when Chris says, is it digital or mobile first? I said it's humanized digital experience. I think if you build it empathetically, and that onus is on every CTO and CIO, like how do I build the right architectures to take advantage of it? You're bang on, you're right. Or else, honestly, if we're trying to dovetail it into how GSM work, it won't really work that well, right? Like we're going to build a stack so heavy, it won't work.
Yeah. So what about the metaverse? And I mean, metaverse in a wide area, in a wide sense, so that, sort of to have more, experiences, a different type of relationship with the technology, not just the metaverse, whatever that is, we don't really know. Is that going to change things?
It won't do much for Chris, but yes.
No, it will. I can see in the metaverse. I can see.
You can see.
My digital twin can. Sorry. Yeah.
I think the beautiful opportunity of so if I may be proud of what people did, Alexander Graham Bell and a few people did a few hundred years ago. It looks like thousands of years ago. They killed distance and time. When you can call from Canada to the UK or to Italy, you kill distance and time. And I think the metaverse is the closest thing you have to be transported without being on a Star Trek set, which is what I love about it. But Monica, 2 things. I don't think it's quite affordable yet, or has that application where we can interact as human beings, right? So we still would prefer Zoom. By the time you set up and I set up, this is much more convenient, right?
Yeah.
For business. Like I'd love to see my mother and both have coffee in the morning. She's 92 years old. But the overhead to get into that space now is not yet there. It's getting there. So I hold potential. I want to add it to my business. Today, if you have a problem, you call me, right? Or you interact digitally with me. Suppose I can't resolve your problem digitally. Somebody has to come to your house, correct? Or somebody has to walk you through something. Oh my God, what a wonderful world, because we're all capable. If I can collaborate with that person in the metaverse and then do it at my own time.
Yeah.
I don't have to wait till 8 a.m. for a Vodafone to schedule a truck or AT&T or Bell or TELUS. No. And you're sharing with me everything completely, like, is it the gateway, is it something? So that moves our world to 24/7 from an empathetic, humanized point of view. And by the way, people say, oh, you're doing it to save TELUS money. No, I'm doing it because then, to be fair, I'm not going to send somebody at 2 a.m. if something went wrong. But if you wake up in the morning, you have no internet and your kids can't go to school, you want that fixed. The classical SLA of 24 to 48 hours does not work. But our infrastructures globally are priced for that. I can't afford to have 10,000 people to give you a 6-hour mean time to repair. Thus, I need to use technology, and the metaverse is a critical part of it.
But you know what's really important about what you just said and Monica's question is that people are jumping to thinking about what the metaverse is. Actually, to go back to your TM Forum ODA comment, making sure we build things more openly and that the interfaces are open, the APIs are open, will allow us to put things together in a much more intuitive, empathetic way on the basis of the customer, not the basis of the telco and the network. And in my mind, that's the biggest single change needed, is that we think much more about the way things get used rather than the technology that's running around in that engine in the middle of it. So I think that openness.
I think we're so happy, Chris. Traditionally, we were so happy whoever had the better engine had the best ARPU.
Yeah, true. Thing. Yeah.
But now that we're building platforms that maybe others can use it, because nobody can compete alone, right? Like Apple without people who build apps would fail. It'll just be a phone. So I think it's very critical. It's very critical to view it in the way when we say we're building engines so other people can build on top of us. But it's a huge cultural shift, because we're so used to the service is a phone, the service is voicemail. No, I'm building a package and an ecosystem where somebody would buy into is where we're going. Plus, yes, I'm consuming minutes and bytes, frankly.
But do you think, and we're coming towards the closing, but that comment is absolutely the issue, the cultural change needed of the thinking within the telco, that actually we're trying to think about how every possible user will use things, which is really interesting, isn't it? Because I can't even imagine how it is for all people with different eye conditions, let alone hearing impaired or people with cognitive or physical, whatever issues, or people who, so I think we are trying to boil the ocean, right? But if we make things building blocks with open APIs and think about the fact that we will need to put things together in different ways, that the way we interact with customers in different ways, but we don't forget the human element, I think that's really important, because we often do forget it. I think that's a big step forward, that cultural change. We know the technology will keep going, will keep coming down in price, and we'll be able to adapt it and write better software, or some Gen AI system will write better software in the future. So I think it's just, I think you mentioned at the very beginning about getting into high schools, getting in the education system. The biggest problem in many ways is the elderly market. How do we get things for the elderly market? Because gradually people will go through the system, and the elderly will have been using iPads and been using Android devices and so on. But it's addressing that aging population today that I think is in many ways the biggest challenge.
And but just in terms of numbers, because it's just like the number of elderly people that are old is growing. But I think that another issue here that is important is the question of openness. So you mentioned APIs, but if you kind of step a little bit further out, it's the whole telecoms ecosystem that is becoming more open. And you go from Open RAN, which Chris is kind of a little bit more skeptical about, but if you start thinking about the fact that the network is not this kind of monolithic thing, that you have more flexibility in how you put things together. So API clearly is important, but it's sort of part of a bigger trend towards making sure that the network does what you need to do for you. And
But
really, it's So
I'm going to cut across you, because when I think about the API thing, I'm thinking much more about other players in the ecosystem who will reach in and take the services and roll them up, rather than just the network per se. So I think so in Ibrahim's robot, social care, healthcare robot, that's we've got to work much more openly with other parties who are in, and telecoms communications becomes embedded in everything. And I think that's the difference, is we now need to listen to voices outside of the telecom industry. And I think what we're saying
100%.
here is you've got to listen to the voices of all the different customers and all the trillions of permutations about how we use services. Anyway, Monica, should we give
that's exactly to your point. Is like, if you have, say, a virtualized network, it doesn't address necessarily that kind of thing, but allows you to have more partners coming in. So that's what I'm saying. It's like, it kind of everything sort of percolates, that if everything is more open, you have all those kind of things that are easier to plug in.
To Ibrahim's point, as long as it's affordable and manageable, then it'll fit, and it fits within the system. We're close to time. Do you want to wrap it up, Monica, and give Ibrahim the last word?
I think Ibrahim was trying to say something. I don't want to put you on the spot, but I do.
No, I mean, my view is we're agreeing. And I think one of the things that you learn more, so Canada is the second largest by geography, but we're a very small country, 40 million people. And we have a third of the market, like it's equally split between three major national players. You learn you cannot do it alone, Monica, right? So and then when for us, 100,000 people is a big population, which is a suburb of a major city around the world, you start thinking of bridging the digital divide in telecom, and you can't build for everyone, right? So I think it's critical that we're open intelligently. Like, we don't want to be plumbers, but we have to be open intelligently. And then here's where I disagree with you. We need to invest in D&I. So it's not just be open from an internet point of view and letting the app guys ride on top of us. What are we doing to make that app person feel as an ecosystem, cheaper to adapt, cheaper to go in? Because if we treat it like everything else, that's what's failing so far. Because not everything is the same friggin' thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that our time is up. We want to make sure that everybody goes with the rest of their lives. So thank you, Ibrahim, and also thanks to all the people in the audience. And if you're interested in partnering with us or doing things with us, we always love to hear from you. And Kendra, over to you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much to our speakers for that great conversation. And thanks to our audience for those comments and questions as well. This will conclude our Inclusively webinar for today. A on-demand version of today's webinar will be made available soon, and that will be available at the senseofhealy.com website. Thanks again to everyone, and we look forward to seeing you at future events.
Thanks, everyone. Great job. Thanks, Ibrahim. Thanks, Monica.
Thanks. Bye-bye.